Good afternoon. Welcome to this special meeting of the Concord Select Board. We're here today to try to begin to respond to some of the very quickly moving events and statements by various officials. In particular, our agenda is to talk about the town manager's memorandum that he sent on March 12th in response to the COVID-19 meetings and programs. So I will ask the town manager if you would like to walk us through this memorandum.
Sure. So the memorandum deals with really the status of board and committee meetings. One of the things, and let me just say, just generally, many of the department heads are here with us so they can answer questions specific to their departments, but they're a very committed group, and we've spent an inordinate amount of time together monitoring the COVID-19 situation, watching the directives we're getting from federal and state leadership, communicating with our surrounding communities to find out what other people are doing, and trying to determine approaches for managing this that are right for Concord. One of the areas that we've really focused, one of the that's an area of focus now is the social distancing, and that means not being within 3 to 6 feet of each other, which is the plume area for if you're going to cough or sneeze, which is one of the ways that COVID-19 is transmitted. So, as I think everyone knows, the governor today, or late yesterday, put out an executive order loosening open meeting law requirements, allowing, normally to have remote participation, you still have to have a quorum in the room to do that. He's waived that requirement and allowing people to do this remotely. So before we got that, however, we were trying to plan for boards and committees, and we basically divided boards and committees into 3 categories: executive, which would be the select board, and school committee and the regional school committee. Regulatory, and there's a list of them, but they include the Board of Health, the Planning Board, the Zoning Board, boards that are basically authorized under statute to make decisions that have regulatory effect. And then there are everybody else, which is non-regulatory. And we have recommended suspending all non-regulatory meetings effective immediately, unless there is a pressing deadline, a statutory mandate, or a grant application or something that just they don't have any flexibility on. They can request permission from that committee's appointing authority, whether it's the moderator, the town manager, or the select board, approval to have the meeting. Now, with the governor's executive order that shuffles, and this is the way this has been, every 5 minutes you get a new piece of information that changes the thinking, and that's why I'll get to that a little bit. But regulatory boards and committees should, if they have agenda items that are time sensitive or for a mandatory deadline, like the ZBA, if they get an application for something, or they're required to have a public hearing in a certain amount of time, otherwise the application gets considered approved. So that we want to make sure they have the opportunity to at least meet and minimally continue the hearing to another date. And then executive committees are going to need to meet because there are policy decisions that will be made as we, do the business of the town, but also contend with this crisis. So we recommended that for both regulatory and executive committees, agenda items be significantly limited to just necessary business items. So things like going through miscellaneous correspondence and liaison reports and things like that, just to keep the amount of time that we're together more brief. And so we are also, part of that is also evaluating town operations. And in light of just information today, in our discussion this afternoon, we are going to suspend non-essential town services and close town buildings. And this is a temporary situation. I don't think anybody can tell you when this is going to end, but we are going to, essential staff are going to continue to come to work and monitor what's happening and evaluate the community's needs and our services. And this distinction of essential versus non-essential is frequently used in weather events, like a snow event. Non-essential personnel are required to stay home if we're shutting down town hall for snow. That line between essential and non-essential is usually pretty clear. Public works, public safety are essential, and clerical and things like that are not. Because this is not a weather event, who's essential and who is not is going to be different. And honestly, it may change day to day depending on what the needs on the situation is. So when I say we are going to be reevaluating daily, We are going to be every single day checking in with each other and finding out what do we need to do differently today to meet the needs that that have emerged since we suspended operations. I will notify. We'll send out a notice after this meeting, unless the board has concerns.
Well, I have a question, when will this be effective?
It'll be effective basically immediately, and so like the library won't be open for the weekend. I think there's only a few departments that are open over the weekend. And then Monday morning, we are asking employees to not come to work unless they're directed by their supervisor. The employees have already been prepped that they're going to be getting a message, an announcement about it, because we wanted to get it out in the early afternoon so people could see it before they left for the weekend, but we hadn't had a chance to kind of talk about it as a group and sort through a few things. So
I assume there'll be a Dropbox of some kind that'll be available for stuff that has to get into the townhouse.
Yep.
Payments, things like that can't be made online.
this we did set up a Dropbox at Harvey Wheeler for people who need to get paperwork in, like social workers or things like that. We already have a Dropbox at Townhouse for bills and things like that. And again, it's how many bills do we get? We can have, because people are basically, because everyone is basically being placed on paid administrative leave, they are going to be expected to be at the ready to return to work if they're called, or find ways to work at home. So
one question I was asked about payment of bills is that using the online services used to have a very financial penalty to it.
I don't know the answer to that. And unfortunately, Carrie LaFleur isn't here, but I'm sure we would waive the fee.
Okay, so I just,
Yeah, I mean, even if it's a fee that's charged to us by the third-party vendor, we would we'll find a way to take care of that.
Okay.
I don't know if Kate knows the answer to that, but
It's imposed by the vendor.
what's that?
It's imposed by the vendor,
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, so
I
it's
don't know
imposed by the
if you
vendor.
wanna credit people back, it's.
give us this are the types of things we have to.
Yeah,
It's an excellent question, so we'll have to figure that out.
Yeah.
And I suspect we have an election coming up,
Mhm.
and what's the current thinking about, will we do that?
So I know the governor there are basically a group of about 150 town councils, the town, municipal attorneys who are working together, and I think they've approached the governor with some discussion points for both town meeting and town elections. As you know, the conducting of town meeting and town elections are all governed by state statute, so there's not a lot of local flexibility there. And so we're basically waiting for additional guidance from the governor, either a special act from the legislature or another executive order that would maybe give us some flexibility. So we don't have that today, though.
And on the subject of town election versus town meeting, there's actually less authority to address a problem with respect to an election than there is with respect to town meeting, because the only way to postpone or reschedule an election is by court order. There is no other mechanism that exists under state statute, so in order to address this situation, it will require a legislative solution.
So we got word on that they were trying to work through that, but haven't gotten the decision on that yet. Tari is in charge of that, but they are having all election workers wear gloves and have frequent wipe downs of the areas, one-time single-use pens or markers, so we're stocking up on that stuff as best we can.
Thank you.
Yeah, we say single-use pens. It's if you need to sign something at a counter, you get to keep the pen.
Now, since we're just hearing from the moderator, at our regularly scheduled meeting on the 23rd, which I hope we'll be able to go ahead with, we will be talking about the protocol for town, postponing potentially anyway town meetings.
So, just a quick note about, I want to go back to the memo that was distributed, because we also talk about programs.
I'm sorry, but one question, because I just want to make sure we get on air a definitive answer. There was some question as to whether or not the Finance Committee public hearings, which are scheduled on the 16th and the 23rd, are canceled then.
Postponed.
But, yes, well.
Yeah, and I think I received an email from the chair. I was copied an email from the chair, and he seemed to indicate in it that they were postponing. We want to work with the Finance Committee. I think the big thing about meetings is now that we've received overnight, this guidance from the governor about open meeting law. We'll be working with MMN, and we have a Zoom or, an online meeting platform. And we just haven't had the time to kind of figure out how we can mend those things together and then have that be, deployable for boards and committees. We are gonna work on that next week and try and get a program set up as soon as possible to do that. I will just, in terms of managing expectations for boards and committees, I'll just say that executive regulatory, non-regulatory criteria will be in effect for this, because the resource is still, even though it's online partially, there's still people that are with MMN. It is a limited resource, and we want to make sure we're using it for things that are really needs, and things that can be put off until we're hopefully through the woods on the crisis can be delayed until then. But we know boards and committees want to get back to work, and we want to try and help that happen as soon as possible. So once we figure out the logistics, we'll notify the executive committees and the regulatory boards. And I know the finance committee will want to know about that as well, even though they're in the non-regulatory category. It is a big time of year for the finance committee because of their reporting to town meeting. So, more to come on that. So then on programs, occasionally outside groups, like non-town groups, sometimes rent from the town our facilities to have meetings. We have suspended that for the time being. All other town programs have essentially been suspended, postponed. And in the case of the recreation department and the library, as well as Beatty Center, we're tying the suspension of activities to the schools. As you know, the superintendent has announced that schools are going to be closed and they're going to reevaluate every week. We will be taking that same approach and coordinating closely with the school district to find out, and with the superintendent to find out when they think they're going to be able to resume school operations, and then at that point we will hopefully be ready to resume with recreation, BD, and the library. And then, like I said, council on aging programs have been suspended. I know there's a lot of questions about how we can care for our seniors. The town is going to be focused on trying to make sure we're maintaining our core services to the community. I know there are volunteer efforts that are underway. I feel badly saying this, but I don't believe the town's going to be in a position to administer or coordinate those volunteer activities, although we certainly are. We support people taking care of their neighbors. The social distancing thing is supposed to only be physical. We really need to make sure we're not distancing ourselves at the expense of caring for one another. But I don't want to set an expectation that I don't think the town can meet. And that includes also monitoring our vulnerable populations, including our senior population. Again, we were just meeting just before this to kind of go through some of that. And as I noted, people should, if they have questions, they should ask them, but just there may not be answers for the questions at this time.
Right.
And then just trying to, you see it on the news and it seems to be moving fast. All I can tell you is that behind the scenes, it's moving even faster than it is on the news. So programs are suspended. Town buildings will be closed as of now, and Monday morning they'll be closed. Services will be suspended, and like I said, there's really no playbook for this, so we're trying to evaluate in real time.
That includes the children's programs at Harvey Wheeler.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I also am told that the Children's Center, which is the private daycare, I think it's closed now for 2 weeks. And I also received word that Minuteman ARC is also suspending activities, I think, for 2 weeks. Yeah, so and they're not town departments, but they are close partners with the town, so I wanted to let the community know about that as well.
What about the private schools in town?
I haven't received word. I don't know if
Judge might have some information.
Do you have any?
On that. He's been coordinating.
I have not heard that yet.
Yeah, and Susan Rasmussen, our health director, and I just need to say that, she's not, I don't see her here, but Health Director Susan Rask has done an admirable job really helping coordinate information, and not only trying to coordinate or stay on top of the policies, but get down to dealing with individual families who may be impacted by this. She's really doing a masterful job. I just wanted to commend her effort in this.
I have a question for her, or somebody else if they can answer it, about Emerson Hospital, or has anyone heard from them, like how prepared are they? Do they have enough isolation cells or whatever?
We had a call last Friday, and Emerson Hospital was on the call. It was a large meeting, Mike was there, community stakeholders, and Emerson did report I believe they're prepared as much as anybody can be prepared for this and project what's going to happen. I believe they're ready. I know the chief is in regular contact with them, so I don't want to speak on Emerson's behalf, but we seem to be getting every indication that they're ready.
I know that they do have some negative pressure capability in the emergency department if they bring somebody in who is suspected or known to be positive, and if you put them in that room, that's isolating them safely. They're also, at this point, probably complete with setting up a screening area that is outside of the emergency department that isolates it completely from the hospital itself.
Great.
So they're definitely moving in that direction. They've been working very hard, and I think that they've got a good plan in place.
I just want to commend the chief. This meeting that Stephen alluded to a week ago Friday, where Chief Judge chaired the meeting and it was attended by all of the schools in town, both public and private. Emerson Hospital, the police department, Chief Joseph was there, and Chief O'Connor was there, as well as representatives from Newbury Court, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some others, but it was a 2-hour very thorough discussion. And then the private schools met afterwards to coordinate among themselves, because they each have very limited health services capabilities, and the concern was if somebody gets it at one of the private schools and their health person is gone, what do they do? They're kind of out of business.
And they've continued those conversations amongst themselves over the past week.
And
along
I
with
think
Susan.
I understand that you're going to be putting together perhaps an additional conference call with that group sometime next week.
We're going to try and do a conference call early next week with them just to see where they are and
I do, and my sources tell me that Concord Academy is going to distance learning, I think, at the end of the month. And I haven't heard from the others, but it's only a matter of time before they do the same thing. And virtually every community around us is taking the same approach. I think they've got the renewed focus on, like I said, on social distancing and just trying to see if we stem the community spread of COVID-19 is really the focus. So that's what this is really all about, is just limiting the interaction. I know in a room full of people it seems kind of counterintuitive, but we had to get this out of the way to let the community know we were at.
Right, thank you. Are the entities department representatives here have any comments they'd like to make about activities in their area, not needing it, but just want to make sure?
No, but I just have some breaking news on the private schools. They are all currently on their spring break. We have not yet heard from Fenn and the Neshoba Brooks when they might resume, but they're on their spring break. Middlesex will not be returning to classes this semester. They'll be doing distance learning. And CA is on break and will be closed at least until May 4th, and they'll make a determination after that time whether it will be distance learning as well.
Interestingly, just as a follow-on to that, the other thing to be aware of in town is that most families that have college students, I have 3 of them in my family, are going to see an influx of a lot of students from a lot of different places. So that's going to impact our numbers. And it's also going to impact a whole lot of other things in town, including the need to reinforce the social distancing at a point when that's probably going to be difficult.
I think the impacts are still on the way up.
Yeah.
And not only, my theory is that now the testing has been accelerated, the numbers of confirmed cases are naturally going to go up as well, simply because they're testing for it better. So I don't want people to be alarmed. I think the probability is still relatively low, and even if you do have it, if you are not in a vulnerable group, it's not life-altering. It's, you're sick, but it's not as dire as it could be. But if you are in a vulnerable group, it can be very, very serious. And so I don't want to cause unnecessary alarm, but I also want to make sure people are taking care of themselves and taking it seriously, because even if you are relatively healthy and younger and it may not impact you, you may give it to someone who could be very negatively impacted. So as the numbers locally start to climb, which they are sure to, I want people to kind of keep that in perspective, that some of that may be just a result of better information.
One other question I had that I forgot to ask earlier was, because there will be so much distance learning going on in the town, we operate our broadband system, so we're gonna see a huge spike in that. You know, folks have been asking me, is Comcast prepared and is the town's IT prepared?
We are, yes.
Yeah, no, we're and the other thing is, and I don't want to spend too much time on this aspect of it, but of course there's an economic component to all of this too, and that's not on the front burner as we sit here right now. Right now we're only focused on health and safety and providing services to our residents. But as this does evolve, certainly I know the federal government is looking at they're calling it a stimulus package. I don't know what it'll end up being, but I want the business community to know that it's certainly on our minds, even though we're not really addressing it right now.
Marcia?
Just a couple of items from Susan Rask, our Public Health Director. There are currently no presumptive cases in the town of Concord, and no one is in quarantine currently in the town of Concord. However, Mass DPH has just issued at 4 o'clock today an update that Massachusetts has now begun to see some initial evidence of community-spread COVID-19, and the Department of Public Health has made recommendations consistent with the transition into community mitigation phase of the response. That means they can't trace where people are getting it from, so that's just to be aware.
Right. Well, that's usually the step right before you get to first confirmed presumptive case.
So another executive order issued by the governor was to prohibit events of larger than 250. I know we have some events coming up. That did not apply to elections and town meetings or secondary education, as far as I'm told. But that's, and I haven't actually read the executive order. I just know that it's out there.
It does not mention town meetings.
Yeah.
It exempts a lot of things, but it doesn't exempt town meetings. I've been in contact with a member of the Lexington Select Board, as well as the superintendent of the National Park. And it would seem fairly clear that as things stand now, our parade, the event at Miriam's Corner, and the ceremony at the bridge on the 19th would need to be canceled. The dawn salute, which is at dawn on April 19th, usually does not have a crowd of 250 people. So I think a decision on that can probably wait. But I think those other 3 events, consistent with the governor's directive this afternoon, will need to be canceled. But frankly, I don't know who it is that does that.
That makes 2 of us.
Is it the ceremonies committee that would do it?
Yeah, I think it would be the ceremonies committee, because they're in
They
charge
could
of
certainly
all of those
recommend
events.
perhaps to the town manager, but I mean, I would think it's a town event.
The permit is signed for the parade by the town manager, so the town manager would be the ultimate authority on whether or not that's to go forward.
So I think we would want to get that out to the public, because I know for the parade, we do have folks coming in from out of town a lot. And we have a band that comes from Michigan every year. So we want to try to get that decision nailed down. The dawn salute's mostly local folks, and I think we can wait a few weeks to see how that plays out.
We'll have to get some we'll get some feedback from the organizers in preparation.
Yeah, you want to
for
talk
making a
John
decision.
Arena, the chair, he and I have been in contact. I told him I would report back anything I learned today at our meeting. And then, as I mentioned, on the 23rd, we'll discuss the protocol for town meeting, but without exemption in the governor's order. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, we're fortunate that our town meeting is a little bit later. Other communities have
Bedford was canceled.
canceled or suspended, postponed, what have you. Other towns are struggling with this. So I think what I want to convey to the community and to the board is, we're all in this together, and it feels like we're trying to figure out the solutions for Concord, somewhat in isolation. But like I said, I can tell you firsthand that every other town around us is struggling with the same things, and the state has been picking up the pace, if you will, in terms of getting guidance and getting things out to us in terms of like executive orders and things like that. And I expect next week to be pretty busy in that regard to let towns know, because the governor's office, I'm sure, is getting bombarded with calls and emails about what are we doing, the state laws have things that we must do as municipalities on certain deadlines, and what's the outcome if we don't meet those deadlines? So I think it's, the word unprecedented has been chucked around a lot lately, and we talked as an SMT, that's pretty right on.
All right, does members of the board have additional questions or comments they'd like to make? Linda?
So your reference to SMT is the senior management team, for the benefit of others who might be watching this. My other comment is, and I'm sure this has already been considered by your team and yourself, that before next Friday's status report out to people on where we are on all of this, there'll probably be sufficient feedback in terms of not being able to access certain kinds of services or other issues that are going to come up. So I hope there's some mechanism with employees that will not necessarily be on board and town buildings being closed, that there's some clear channels for people to get this kind of feedback to you and your senior management team before going forward with.
That's a great point, Linda. I think ideally, if there's a service that if a resident has a need, or just wants to let us know how they feel about it, if it's a particular department, they should contact that department, and the department will then filter it back through their senior manager to myself and to Kate, and then or through the board to town departments. But I think, like I said, we're keeping it as flexible as possible. So if on Monday we learn that there's a service that is in high demand, or there's a deadline or something that we need to meet, we can call in employees and mobilize quickly to meet that service demand. There just isn't the time and capacity to go through and evaluate every single service and say, what can we do, what can we not do. We just have to
Just be responsive.
put a metaphorical wall up and then find out where we need to put gates.
Good.
Other questions? Susan?
Yeah, I just had a comment, and that was just to thank you, everyone, for your efforts. It is uncharted territory, and we're going to do the best we can.
And we are trying hard, and I think the biggest thing is trying hard to communicate with the townspeople what we're doing. We've been trying, the number of times we've drafted statements that by the time we get ready to release them aren't relevant anymore has been really alarming. And yesterday we spent a long time together working on the message that I sent out to employees about the status of things. Closing wasn't even on the table as a discussion point, and today as things shifted and we saw what other communities were doing, it became clear that we really had to take the same approach. So we're trying the best we can to make decisions, filter information, make decisions, communicate those decisions, and then broadcast the results to people. And so all we ask for is some patience, and we're trying as hard as we can to get information out. We know getting out the word to the community is the second priority behind protecting health and safety.
One of the things I'm sitting here looking at this computer that's showing this meeting on Facebook, is that what I was told? So one of the things we might think of as a way to get more information out is not so much if we're having a meeting, but on a weekly basis, perhaps as the town manager, you could be on here providing the citizens of the town with update. Here's what we've learned this week, here's what we're doing. It might be a way for more people to learn about developments.
So one of the things, actually, after we adjourn here, I'm going to go with the police chief, and we are going to do a robocall to the community-wide phone call, notifying them about town services. I kind of buried the lead on that one. I'm sorry. So that's the plan. We're going to basically model the script on the information I've just given to you, but send out a call. Not everybody gets those either, and I've always been somewhat reluctant to use those because the more you use it, the less effective it is in case of an emergency, but I think we're at that level.
Yeah. And periodically, again, your Facebook kind of thing might be.
Yeah,
helpful.
Erin Stevens, our intrepid communications officer, has been doing an excellent job kind of keeping things posted, so.
I trust she's essential personnel.
Always. And so I think she's done, like I said, if you're not following the town of Concord on Facebook or on Twitter, that's a must-do, because there'll be the most up-to-date information besides the website, which, since most of us are going to be on these, following us on Facebook is really the single best thing you can do to get up-to-date information, because when the website gets updated, she usually puts a note on Facebook saying, hey, check out what's updating the website. We do have a COVID page that we've been maintaining. I think that Susan has been maintaining that with Aaron's help, and that has the links to the CDC and Massachusetts Department of Public Health pages, which has like most up-to-date stuff. But then I would also encourage people to go to their individual departments pages to get updates on individual department services. Not all the information will be consolidated on the main page, because that would make the main page unmanageable.
Yeah,
So just make sure you're digging a little deeper to get the information you need.
right.
How can the select board back up the town? This is an unprecedented place. But there are 5 of us, and we all have our own social networks. We also have our own eyes and ears in the town. But I join my fellow select board members in applauding and being thankful for all of both the essential and non-essential town employees, because we're very, very lucky. I know we've got, for instance, a great light plant, great IT department, clean water that's delivered to everybody's homes, an amazing emergency services department. We're very lucky. That is not going to keep everybody in town feeling safe. So, if there are things that you need help with, or any of the essential employees need help with, I certainly volunteer. I won't be in the building, but I will be online.
I think that just to answer that specifically, I think as the executive leaders, as the executive elected leaders of the community, you are uniquely positioned to provide two-way communication. Not only communicating back to us what we're not seeing or not getting to quickly enough, but also communicating to your constituents the ways we're trying to manage this that they probably don't see if they may not be watching the meeting. The stuff doesn't always end up in the newspaper in a timely way, so just let them know we're on it to the greatest extent of our ability, and then, like I said, filter information back to us and feedback, because we can change really quickly if we need to.
Right, thank you. Any other? Yes, Terry.
I'm wondering if anyone has any information about the test kits, because I know this is outside of town government, so maybe we don't have information on it, but.
I don't know if I want to go there on that. I don't want to put anybody in the spot if the information's not right. It's not.
Well, and I think that's all about to change, because everybody's probably aware that the federal government just declared a state of national emergency and relaxed every rule associated with testing, with a plan to do a major blast of testing thousands and thousands of people as quickly as they can. So I think we're all going to stay tuned and see what's going on there.
All right.
When you thought of that question, the answer was different than
That's
than when you just asked it.
That's right, you're right. I wrote this question down 2 or 3 hours ago.
Yeah,
That's different now.
The answer is different.
That's correct.
This is the world we're in right now.
That's right. So I really like your suggestion that, when you go on the web page for the town, it has a really good red button that says alert and COVID-19, but it didn't have every specific department, so you're right, you do have to go in, like if you're interested in the Council on Aging, you have to go to that page and see that Harvey Willer's
We simply can't tie that much information to the alert button, and the public health information is primary.
Our public health officer is here. I want to ask her if she has any comments she wanted to make.
Just on the test kits at 4 o'clock, DPH emailed revised guidance for testing. They, you know, before it was very restricted who could test because they've had limited lab throughput. We now have 2 labs certified in the state as well as a state lab. So that many more people are gonna be tested. They do have like a whole matrix of like how to prioritize that, which I could share with you. I'm not sure it's the number of test kits as much as it's the lab throughput that's been restricting it, so, but I think they are hoping to ramp it up and open it up to many more people very soon. But not everyone, I mean, don't think everybody can just get a test kit and be tested, because that's not where it's gonna go. Still gonna have to be a physician's orders.
Any other questions from the board? Are there any public comments? Yes, Chief?
I'd just like to add one thing, back to the Emerson Hospital conversation. Like I said, they're doing a fantastic job. They're equipped to deal with patients that come in. But the one thing that is hugely important is that if anybody is going to go into Emerson Hospital, don't just show up. Call them ahead of time so that they know you're coming and they can prepare for it. Because if you just show up and walk into the emergency room or the screening area, then you've possibly infected other people. So give them advance notice.
Yeah, the guidance has been clear on that, and I think I was made aware of another situation earlier today where it was clear that someone just was not following the guidance from CDC and DPH. I don't want to speculate, but potentially they felt it was inconvenient or maybe didn't apply to them. It applies to everybody. That's why we are sitting further apart from each other than we normally would in a meeting. I mean, the guidance applies to everybody, and you must follow it. Otherwise, we're going to be in this for a long time.
Any other comments? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you.
I'll see you.